Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show. In today's music world, who do you think is the biggest musical icon? Is it Elvis Presley? How about Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Jimmy Page, Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin, Roger Daltrey, Pete Townsend of The Who? Nah, you gotta say probably the biggest musical icon in the musical world is Ozzy Osbourne. How did that happen? It's a fascinating story, and we're going to regroup and talk about Ozzy Osbourne's career a bit. Because if you've been around as long as me, and I was in junior high school and high school in the 70s, Black Sabbath was ubiquitous, man. They were everywhere. When you were in the schoolyard, there was people walking around with boom boxes playing the Paranoid album and hearing Only Fairies Wear Boots and War Pigs and Paranoid and Iron Man. Nothing sounded like Sabbath. Man, that sludgy sound. And without a doubt, they are one of the most influential bands of all time. You know, Led Zeppelin at one point was heavier, but Led Zeppelin went way beyond just being a hard rock heavy metal band. But not Sabbath, man. They were like the ultimate, really, of that heavy metal, sludgy sound. Going back to their debut classic album, Black Sabbath, and let's put some of this stuff out so we can appreciate it a little bit. Black Sabbath, of course, the classic Paranoid. In fact, when I was in high school, I played in a band called Strychnine. And we used to play a bunch of Black Sabbath stuff. And it was always really, really fun to play. But Sabbath had those fans. Ozzy, Ozzy, even back then. And, they were a big band. Not Stone Zeppelin Who big, but they were big. Madison Square Garden level for sure. But, the first two Sabbath albums came out in 70. Unfortunately, by like 78, and that was such a huge year of rock and roll when they did Never Say Die, they were pretty much done, commercially and artistically to a large extent. Ozzy was just beyond repair, even according to the band, with his substance abuse and issues. And they fired Ozzy, of course, from his band, Black Sabbath. And that was that. Ozzy fell on hard times, man. He didn't know what was going to happen, and luckily he found Sharon Osbourne. Sharon Osbourne, the daughter of Don Arden, one of the most legendary, vicious managers of music in his time, and Sharon Osbourne clearly learned a lot from her dad. So she took Ozzy Osbourne, who was not in great shape, and really got his act together, and they formed the band Blizzard of Oz, which their classic debut album, right? And of course, when this album came out and the follow-up, Diary of a Madman, it was a band. It was not Ozzy Osbourne, the album Blizzard of Oz. Blizzard of Oz was the band, but the album was a huge hit. And it came out with Ozzy's name bigger than the band. Some of the band members weren't happy about that. And it was definitely a band effort. Songwriting-wise, Randy Rhoads and Daisley and Lee Koslecki on drums, who had a career in Uriah Heep. And all of a sudden they realized, it's Ozzy Osbourne solo, and they're just the sidemen. And that's not what it was supposed to be. And, of course, later on, Daisley and Koslecki were fired, and they sued, and then it's debated who forced it. Was it Sharon Osbourne and Ozzy? They've gone back and forth saying it was the other one, but they actually had their parts re-recorded, and at least Lee Kerslake, the drummer of Uriah Heep, who was the drummer in those first two albums, he lost everything in the suit. He filed suit against Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne for what he thought was his due credit, and he lost. And he lost basically everything. There's a documentary on Lee Kerslake, it's a wonderful thing to see. He's actually in tears at the end. He finally gets a gold record. He has no money, but he's got a gold record of Blizzard of Oz. So, interesting side note. But Sharon Osbourne, tough as she is a revolutionary. And she brought Ozzy Osbourne from despair at the bottom he was back to the top. And a huge touring act, massively successful albums, big hits on, you can find them on the best of greatest hits albums of Ozzy Osbourne, and even created his own music festival, Ozzfest, with really big bands playing. And what did they do? Came up with the concept of charging the bands to be on the festival. Never heard that one really before. Normally you go on tour, you get paid to be on it. Now, you want to be on Ozzfest, you're going to pay. Pretty revolutionary stuff. This is hardcore business. And Ozzy and Sharon and the family are obviously financially rewarded hugely for it, and Ozzy is at the top. But he's such a lovable character. Even then, you just gotta love this guy. He's kind of like, got that, Velcro suit. He's just really untouchable. But when I really fell in love with Ozzy, and I had these albums, and I always liked Black Sabbath. I don't love Black Sabbath, but I like Black Sabbath, and I feel the same way about Ozzy solo. Some of the stuff is fantastic, some of it's kind of blah, but you always kind of love Ozzy. Where I really fell in love with Ozzy is watching the Osbournes, the MTV show, 2002. You would think that would kill a serious, badass rock and roll star doing a sitcom, a reality sitcom on MTV. But not Ozzy Osbourne. They pulled it off. That show was fantastic. Me, my wife, and my kids, we used to watch that show religiously. Not so much just because of Ozzy and as lovable as he was, trying to figure out what he would say as he's stumbling through the scenes, but his family was just so lovable, and it was genuine, even though it's for the camera. You really fell in love with them, and you fell in love with Sharon and what kind of manager she was and how she took control of her husband and really cared for him, and they had a loving family, even with the infidelities and whatever else was going on. And it was a wonderful, wonderful series that I guess lasted 4 or 5 years. That's really the show that brought Ozzy Osbourne from being just a famous rock star, lead singer of Black Sabbath, a very famous heavy metal band, and having a really big, successful solo career. Well, that TV show brought him into the general consciousness, where Ozzy Osbourne, forevermore, became bigger than Black Sabbath, and even his solo career. He's Ozzy Osbourne, the icon, and it always remained that way. And it's really a fascinating, fascinating story. And I can't think of anybody else who had the talent and the personality to pull that off. It sounds easy. After the Osbournes, Eddie Money did a show, and Dee Snider of Twisted Sister did a show, and there's been many others. Same with Kardashians, love them or hate them, and I don't like them, but they've been pulling it off for decades. So many other people have tried. There's this magic formula, this intangible it factor that Ozzy Osbourne has and his family had that others don't have. And it's a wonderful, mysterious trait that's just wonderful. You look at Ozzy Osbourne as he mumbles and stumbles and, buried under all of those tattoos and drugs and alcohol and foibles and human errors, he's just this lovable heart in there, and you fall in love with him. And I think that greatly contributes to this love factor that everybody has for Ozzy. And unfortunately, as you probably know, of course, he passed away today at the age of 76. And as sad as it is, and it is very sad, what a life he has had. It's extraordinary. Ups and downs and ups and downs, and obviously so much love towards him from the public, from the industry, from people he's worked with, and he always is up there landing on his feet. And leave it to Sharon Osbourne, I guess, that he passed away today, and about 2 weeks ago they had the tribute concert to him while he was still alive, and had him on the stage, doing whatever 5 or 6 songs with the original Black Sabbath. Nice to see. Had Bill Ward back on the drums. But wonderful timing that never seems to work out. Whether it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they finally induct people after they're deceased. What a wonderful thing to have a tribute concert with Ozzy there. And singing in good form, even though he was in this chair, because he couldn't walk anymore, unfortunately, from his Parkinson's disease and whatever else he was dying from. He was still able to sing sitting there, and it was a wonderful, wonderful moment to see. And wonderful that they were able to pull it off while he was still alive. Unlike you normally have, like whether it's Freddie Mercury and countless others, tribute concerts after they're deceased. Leave it to Sharon Osbourne and Ozzy to be able to pull that off. It's a great thing, and it makes you kind of smile because he went out in a way under his terms and in a wonderful way. And that's just great. You got to smile and say, Ozzy Osbourne, what a wonderful career you had. What an incredible legacy. And as a child of the 70s, I mean, I was born in 63, but in the 70s, I was in my rock and roll prime. And like I said, Black Sabbath was a big band, but they weren't huge, but they were a big heavy metal band. Nobody, he was a cult thing. People loved Ozzy then, but it was more of Black Sabbath fans. Who would have thought in the mid-70s that Ozzy would be at this level, decades and decades, 50-plus years later? It's an incredible thing. So, my tribute to Ozzy Osbourne, a wonderful legacy with Sabbath, a wonderful, hugely successful legacy solo. There's tons of Black Sabbath. There's a reunion live album. For a guy who's not a huge fan, I certainly have a lot of Black Sabbath. There's Past Lives, collection of 2 concerts, and there's lots of compilations. If you're not a big Sabbath fan, you can get something like this. A nice single disc compilation. And then you got Symptoms of the Universe, a nice double CD compilation of that classic Black Sabbath music from the 70s. Really the forerunners of heavy metal then and to this day. And that's quite a tribute for sure. So let me know what you think, you Ozzy Osbourne fans. Ozzy, you definitely have him where you deserve to be. He was no Satanist, all of that crap against him, He was a good-hearted man. And I hope you are resting in peace. My condolences to your wonderful family. And, with ups and downs, as every family has, you guys really, it was fun watching you and the Osbournes. It was just great. So my condolences to you and your family and your friends. And thank you for 50-plus wonderful years of music and somehow becoming probably the biggest icon the music world has. An amazing accomplishment. Thanks for watching the Alan Rosenberg Show. If you're new to my channel, hit subscribe. And I have playlists. There are tributes. There are favorite albums. There's lots of playlists. 484 videos. 5 years worth of doing that. But most importantly, I love your comments. So send me your comments, your feelings about this. Do you love Sabbath, Ozzy, and your feelings about it? Have a wonderful day. I'm going to go put on some Sabbath. Have a good one.